So we're going to start looking at solving multi-step equations. So let's write that title since we don't have one. Solving multi-step equations. So we took a test a couple weeks ago on solving two-step equations. So we know how to solve when there's one step, when there's two steps. So these are going to have more than one step. And then in between that unit and the one now we're just starting, we did a whole unit on simplifying because we needed those skills in order to accomplish solving these equations. So these are going to have multiple steps, and it's going to need us to simplify in order to get down to the answers. So remember the difference between an expression and an equation. Equation has an equal sign. An expression does not. So in an expression, like 5x plus 2, I can tell you what x is and ask you to evaluate it and simplify it. But you can't tell me that when I say 5x plus 2 that x equals something for sure, because you don't know. But once you add an equal sign, like any of these, we now can solve for the variable and find out what does that variable equal. 8x minus 14x is an expression. If there's no equals 24, then you can't tell me what x is. We don't know. So 8 times something minus 14 times something. We need to know, well, what does that equal? Once we know it equals 24, now we can go back and figure out, all right, what did we multiply by? So without the equal sign, it's just an expression, and there's no way to solve for x. But once we add the equal sign and we know what this expression is equal to, we can figure out what the value of the variable is. So for these now, we're going to practice a little bit of our simplifying, which we just tested on, and then we're going to go back and make sure we remember how to show a check, how to show our work properly. So when we look at this, we still need to think about there's two sides to this equation. And just remember, any equation, 8 equals 8 is a true equation. If I do something to one side and make this a 7, in order for this equation to still be true, I need to do the same exact thing on the other side. And as long as I do that, the equation is always true. All right, so anything I do on one side, I got to do on the other. Before I start doing anything on either side of this equation, though, I can simplify, and we just took the test on that. Now, if I have something on the left side of the equal sign and something on the right that are like terms, I can't just put them together. We'll talk about what we need to do later on when we see that. But we are only simplifying on the right side of the equal sign or just simplifying on the left side of the equal sign. So you're only combining like terms on one side of the equal sign or the other. So in this case, 24 is over here by itself. On the right side, I've got two terms, 8x and a negative or minus 14x. Those are like terms. They're on the same side of the equal sign. This is an expression on this side. I can simplify this expression. So just like we just tested on, this is an 8x and a negative 14x. So I'm doing 8 minus 14. So that's going to be a negative 6x. All right. Bring down your equal sign. Bring down the 24. These two equations are equivalent. They're the same thing. They mean the same thing. We've just simplified, and now it's a lot easier to figure out what x is. Because looking at this one, if I just said, what's the answer, without you being able to write anything down, you might have to sit there a while and think about it and figure it out. But once we've simplified that side, and it's just negative 6x equals 24, it's pretty simple to see that negative 6 times negative 4 is going to be 24. So boom. So we always want to simplify to make our lives easier. Now, we know what the answer is just by looking at it, but we have to show our work algebraically. How do we undo this problem? So this says negative 6 times x, and we talked about the way we eliminate times is by the opposite, division. And since it's a negative, we need to divide by the negative. And if we do it on one side, we have to do it on the other. Okay, so what realistically, or what actually happens here is when I divide negative 6 by negative 6, I get a 1x. But we don't have to write the 1 in front of it. So it's not that they actually go away, they just become a 1, and we just don't need to write the 1. So we have x isolated, which means we have an answer. Whatever's on this side, x equals that. So 24 divided by negative 6 is negative 4. There's my answer. X equals negative 4. Now we still need to do checks. So we did checks on simple 1 and 2 step equations. This is just going to be a little more involved here. We have more than one x. In both places, we need to replace it with our answer. So just a reminder on how we do a check. You rewrite the original equation, replacing the variable with our answer, and seeing if it makes sense. So rewriting the original, 24 equals, instead of 8x, it's 8 times negative 4 minus. Instead of 14x, it's 14 times negative 4. Now, the only time we work on both sides of our equation is when we're trying to solve for a variable. So when we get over here to the check, there's no more variables. We've plugged in a number. So we're not working on both sides of this equation. We're just simplifying the right side, simplifying the left side, and making sure both sides come out to the same number. The left side's already simplified, so it is never going to change. So that is going to be a 24 all the way down our check, however many lines it takes us to simplify the right side. Okay, so don't start taking things away from both sides. That's only when you're solving for an x or a variable. So on the right side here, we need to multiply 8 times negative 4 is negative 32 minus 14 times negative 4. Now, we should be able to do that in our heads, but we can just grab a calculator. That's fine. So 14 times 4 is 56. So 14 times negative 4 is negative 56. If you want to put it in parentheses to organize it, perfectly fine. You don't have to. When we minus a negative, it goes plus plus. So this is negative 32 plus 56. I highly suggest that even if we can do this mentally, for the sake of the check, let the calculator check it. So we're going to put in the negative 32 plus 56. And we're going to ensure that that comes out to 24. We end up with 24 on both sides. Check works, which means I automatically know my answer is right. So this is again going to be one of those tests eventually, when we get there, that you can check every single answer and you know if you got it right or wrong. Okay, so for the next one now. You got two sides. I'm not going to draw the dotted line. Eventually we want to get away from that. But that's our dividing line. So I've got a fully simplified number on the right side. And then on the left, I just need to combine all my like terms. So I see two terms that have the variable p. So I'm going to combine those. This 8 is just going to stay by itself. When we just took our test, we always put the variables up front. That's still a good habit to be in, but it's not essential. So if you want to just bring the 8 down, that's fine. If at this point you're comfortable putting the variable up front and that's just how you're used to doing it, then keep doing it. That's fine as well. So when I combine a negative 14 and a negative 8, that's a negative 22p. And this 8 is still there. It's a positive 8. So if I'm going to put it at the end now, that is a plus 8 because it's positive. If you wanted to leave it in front, it would say 8 minus 22p. And that's exactly the same as what we have written here. Okay, that's equivalent. So if you want to put the 8 up front, that's fine. And this side hasn't changed. So all I've done is combine like terms on the left side of the equation. This stayed the same, the 8 just stayed the same, the equal sign came down. So I combined like terms, I've got negative 22p. Now it's a two-step equation. So really all I've added here is one extra little step, which is simplifying, which we just took a quiz on. So we should, at this point, feel pretty comfortable. This is a two-step. We want to get this letter by itself, isolated, so it says p equals, and we need to start with a lonely number. Save 22 for last. We don't care about 14. It's on the opposite side of the equal sign. We're trying to eliminate the numbers that are next to the variable so that it eventually can just say p equals. So I don't care about the negative 14. It is not a problem. These two numbers are the issue. Okay, so we're going to start with the lonely number, the number being added or subtracted, and that's the 8. I need to get it down to a 0 so that it goes away. So a positive 8, I get it down to a 0 by minusing 8. And when I do something on the left side of the equation, I've got to do it on the right side as well. So it goes away. I'm left with negative 22p. And negative 14 minus 8 gets me negative 22. Almost done. P is not by itself yet, though. I still have this negative 22 that's being multiplied by p. So to get rid of multiplication, we divide, and we're going to show it as a fraction. If I do it on the left side, I do it on the right side. So I need to see it on both sides here. Dividing these two gets me 1, or 1p, which I don't need to write the 1. So at that point, basically, p is isolated. And anything divided by itself is 1. So my answer here is 1. I don't know it's right until I check it. So the check, right next to it. Let's do it in a different color. Rewrite the original. 8 minus 14 times 1 minus 8 times 1. So now I'm going to multiply and multiply. So 8 minus 14 times 1 is 14, minus 8 times 1 is 8. Keep going. 8 minus 14 is negative 6. Negative 6 minus 8, negative 14. Check works. My answer is right. Alright, I'm going to give you a minute. I'm going to pause the video. See if you can try number 23. Let's see how you do. Go ahead and pause the video. And then when you're done, press play. And let's see how you did. Okay, so here's all the work. I combined like terms. And I got a negative 17k plus 12 stayed. At that point, I've got a two-step equation. So I'm going to get that variable by itself. So I took 12 from both sides. Got negative 17 on the left. These went away, leaving me just 17k. Divided to finish it off, I got 1. Plugged that 1 back into my original equation for my check. Multiplied and then simplified, and I got 5 equals 5, which means my check works, which means my answer of 1 is good. Okay, if you didn't get that right, pause the video and find your mistakes, and hopefully you can fix those. So moving on to 24. Same idea, we're simplifying one side and then solving it like we've always solved it. So on the right side, as soon as you see those parentheses, you should think distribute. So 6 times 5x is 30x, and 6 times 8 is 48. So we have 228 equals 30x plus 48. At that point, it's a two-step equation, and we should all feel really good about it. Okay, so step 1, simplify. Step 2, just solve your two-step equation. So I'm going to minus 48 on both sides, leaving me just 30x. You have a calculator at this point, use it. 228 minus 48, it's going to leave you 180. 30 times x means I'm dividing. This cancels, or basically becomes a 1x. And when I divide here, that is 6. All right, what does this check look like? So we got to include those parentheses. We're going back to the original. So it's going to say 228 equals 6 times. Now, it's going to say 5 times x, so 5 times 6. If you want to use another set of parentheses for your multiplication, that's fine. Sometimes it just gets to look a little crazy when you've got these parentheses, then you got another set of parentheses. So whatever you prefer. I like the little dot since I already have parentheses in the problem, but that's not a requirement. You can do it however you like. Now, one step at a time. We work inside parentheses first, multiplication before addition. So the very first thing I'm going to do is 5 times 6. So that's 30. The next thing I'm going to do is add the inside of parentheses. Parentheses first before you multiply. So inside parentheses, 30 plus 8 is 38. The last thing I'm going to do is multiply. And I'm not going to just automatically write 228 equals 228. I'm going to grab my calculator. And I'm actually going to multiply 6 times 38 and make sure I get 228. Don't fake your checks. If you fake your checks, you're never going to know if you actually got your answer right or wrong. Now notice I kind of just ignored the left side there for a while. I was just working the right side. That's okay. I need to go back and I need to actually make sure these equations are in proper form. So I need to have a number over here. So I didn't write it as I worked, but I do need to go back and fill those in. All right. The work for the last two is going to be posted here in a second if you need to copy it down. I'm not going to work through them on here. I feel like you can do most of this at this point. Here's the work for the last two.